how specifically does data center innovation, whether it's NetApp or you see it in the industry as a whole, affect business from a benefit, from a flexibility or an agility standpoint?
Well, I think the most important way is if you look at the kind of the convergence of technology demands today with the ability of the business to scale, the data center often is the blocker to enable the business to put the equipment in place and actually run the systems that they need to run their businesses. The second part of it is if you run those data centers in the way we always have run them, the efficiency is so poor that the affordability comes into play as well. So it's both on a standpoint, and I'll give you a metric. So 10 years ago, NetApp was building data centers that only required about 1.5 kilowatts per rack. Today, we have peak demands at 42 kilowatts per rack. You can't deliver you can't deliver 42 with the same technology you delivered 1.5. So you have to change to enable the business to scale at an affordable price, and that requires innovation.
As a large end user company for data center capacity, how do you see that innovation, directly enabling some of the things that you'd like to be able to help your company be successful at?
Well, I think I'd start off with budgetarily, right? You talk about a CFO, and you're sitting there, and he's wondering year over year why the cost for computing keeps going up. And in my area, over a third of my budget comes out of a data center, and he's like, isn't it just bits and bytes? And you explain the relevance and all those other things behind it. So we've got this massive surge of data. I've got all these servers which we need to secure and control and manage. And as a company, GE wants to, obviously, like every other entity, optimize its cost structure around that. And so a smart data center, coupled with a collaborative environment between IT, its users, its finance organizations, really understanding better how they're spending the money is a big driver and a change. And then, I've been in this industry a long time. It used to be, of course, I'm on the IT application side of old here. It used to be that data centers were kind of like these black boxes, and the application guys would go through a ritual exercise and genuflect and turn over their applications and have them hosted. But today we can't survive that way. With the growth that's coming and all the changes that are happening, the kilowatt hours that were depicted there, the obvious, when you look at the electricity consumption and the other things that are happening here, we have to address the green issues. We absolutely have. And in the end, I think that's how we're going to get to this cost-effective platform.
Coming from inside the data center, Mark, how do you see the innovation from, because I'm going to back up just a minute. I really see the data center, and I think most of the panel would probably agree, that we see the data center as a system, right? And there's no aspect of the data center that you can own or operate independent of the rest of it and expect it to be successful, efficient, or well understood by the enterprise. So thinking of that and thinking of how, just for instance, from the inside of the data center, obviously VMware plays very heavily there. How do you see the innovation from that aspect really having an effect on what you can or can't do with your data centers in order to drive that innovation in the company?
Sure. Yeah. Well, VMware's been very successful over the past few years as far as just efficiency, saving money. So if you think about our products, you have 10 servers. You can get down and run on 2 or 3 servers. So you save money on the hardware, you save money on the software, you save money on the power. So that's clearly something that we've been focused in on is the cost side of it. The other thing that I think to keep in mind is just the whole agility. We're all under a lot of pressure to do more things in a much more rapid time frame. So I think that's the other side of it as well, is that how can you get things done much faster, so using like cloud technology. If I want to be able to focus on more of the applications, if you will, so if I can have a more efficient data center where it's resources, or workloads and that sort of thing, and I can focus on the application side, I can spend more of my energy there. So I think it's all really, you want to save money because that's what we're supposed to do as IT professionals, get the most cost-efficient environment. But I think where we really can add the most value is on how we can add new products and services, that agility, that speed. I think that's really what we as IT professionals have as a responsibility, is how can we move faster, be an enabler of our businesses.
So that's great. So I'm going to move to the next topic now, and starting with you, Dan, is that when When you think about effective ownership of a data center, I guess just really quickly, because I'd like to get a couple of answers from the rest of the panel as well. Really quickly, what do you see as ownership meaning from a data center perspective? And then why do you think that's important to the organization?
So to kind of build off of the past conversation, and a comment that you made earlier as far as the data center being in the back seat and kind of coming to the forefront, that effective ownership is kind of, to Mark's point, an enabler, right? There's kind of in the history, I'm from the IT side, so I've seen it in different organizations. You can have IT as an order taker, if you will, just the business giving out actions and the execution, and then you drive the cost efficiencies and so on and so forth, and some of the sustainability actions. Then you can, that partnership, if you will, and then you start driving some of the enablement, go-to-market, the agility, the flexibility. But then for some organization, IT is the business, right? So when you get to that level, it's all about the drive. So as far as for effective cost management, there's all the tactical aspects of putting the money back in the business's bucket, et cetera, allowing more investment, bringing the good stories from a sustainability side. We had said that previously the IT communications with the CFO, CSOs, right? Now you start seeing in the industry organizations the sustainability officers are engaging at the data center environment, CTO, CIO, obviously. And now starting to have those conversations, it's not only on the economics, it's absolutely, it needs to be there, we know that, but you start showing that altruistic behavior as well. So there's the tangibles, but taking it to a higher level, it's on the relationship level.
Yeah. So going back down to David, from your perspective, I mean, I know that NetApp's actually made some pretty good strides in this area as far as trying to manage an organization that actually owns and is responsible for delivery of data center services. What have you seen as some of the primary benefits of that strategy from a NetApp perspective?
Well, there's the obvious ones. By taking positive control and not accepting what was built 30 years ago as your starting point, they're cheaper to build, they're more efficient, they scale better, they run more cheaply. The facility we built in Raleigh is a 25 megawatt facility, runs at a PUE of 1.2, first ever Energy Star certified data center in the US. The net of that is it costs me about $4.5 million less in power to run every year, and I built it for less than $3 million per megawatt. So by challenging the old components of the data center using commercial rather than data center type components and putting the right treatment of ends of power towards dev test versus production and using outside air to cool most of the time, we're able to build it more cheaply and run it a lot more cheaply, and we're a lot more agile. I'd like to expand on the point, though, a couple of points. One is that the point David made earlier about just being less worse. What I described isn't what less worse, it's actually really good and starting from scratch kind of a thing. The industry is so bad right now, in my view, that a little less worse is a pretty damn good improvement. I was in Alaska about a year ago, and it was a very short story, and I asked an audience of about 60 people, one in Juneau and one in Anchorage, what's their single biggest data center challenge in Alaska? And the answer was exactly the same without hesitation in both cities. When it gets cold, the water chiller pipes tend to break. And I said, you have water chiller pipes, why? And the audience got quiet. They never thought about using outside air in that climate. And the biggest objection they could come up with was it gets too cold. And I said, well, aren't you generating a lot of heat? I mean, there's simple physics at stake here. And just because we used to have mainframes and we used to run water under the floor doesn't mean that we need to build data centers like that anymore. So less worse is pretty damn good, but innovation is a margin better.
Kurt, speaking obviously very large organization, must have, just when you think of engineering capacity alone, let alone actual IT need for data center space, what kind of best practices have you guys implemented to try to make sure that you're owning that infrastructure effectively?
I'd start off by saying, yeah, let's just talk engineering for a second, right? And as an IT guy, your best customer are engineers because they think they can do your job better, right? Let's start with that, right? I know
Best
you all-
customer, you mean worst customer?
I'll
Hardest
let you
customer?
decide. But no, I think establishing an effective controlled environment for engineer that still gives them the flexibility is a key challenge. From a planning basis, there's rogue servers all over GE. And while every time we think we've counted them all, there's more that just kind of crop up. With the challenges of trying to do that cost effectively and allowing that organization to be really focused on innovation, there's the meeting in the middle that we have to do. Every year over year, we've allocated a considerable amount more to bring those servers into control and really align that organization. I think it clearly is one of those, if you don't think about an engineer without the appropriate tools, who absolutely has to design innovation and drive that organization forward, you're going to impair him. It's just a question of how you attack that model, and so that's what we're trying to do.
Right. Thinking agility, thinking innovation, and this is a subject I've even written about on the IT side, is that the environment we're moving into today from a cloud perspective really means that companies are starting to get to the point where they can actually see an idea, see an opportunity, and actually think about addressing it in a time frame where it means they can actually benefit from it and take advantage from it, right? I mean, all of us are familiar, or at least most of us are familiar with the ERP implementation, that it was a great idea when we thought of it. We really needed it after we figured out we needed it. We were going to start saving money the minute it was installed, but it was 18 months to 2 years later before it was installed, right? So if you think about your data center capacity and what it runs in your data center, what that enables for your business, and think about, I'm Joe, CEO, traveling in Malaysia. I see an idea, an opportunity for pulling in some new suppliers or identifying a new product or whatever it happens to be. And I'm going to tell them, I'll get back to you in 3 months after IT has approved the project. And then I'll take another 18 months building it and putting it in somewhere in a data center that I have to build regionally because I can't get to it from where I live today, right? So thinking about that from the perspective of innovation and agility, how do you see the onslaught of cloud computing really affecting people's thinking around the data center?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we have to think about is just capacity. We've got to get away from that physical side of things. It's just like, I have this amount of capacity, and how can I best use that? Because I think what cloud will really offer for us is that you no longer have the project and a server. I have a project, well, let's go get a server, let's provision it, and it could easily be 90 days or even longer. But if you think of, I'm going to have this amount of capacity, and if I do my planning well, I can kind of expand and contract. But I think that's really the environment that we have to aim for. Is we're all under a lot of pressure to get a lot of things done. I mean, I can't think beyond 90 days at Symantec, or I'm sorry, at VMware. Any Freudian slip, my prior company. But at VMware, anything beyond 90 days, no one wants to think about. I mean, it's really one of these projects that I've got to do things in a very, very compressed time frame. So I don't think physical anymore. And then if you take that to the cloud, you're going to have your private cloud, okay? And this is the resources you have and so forth. You're going to, from time to time, need additional capacity. And that's where the public cloud comes in, is that you can burst, you can leverage it, and so forth. And it's really going to be based on your company, your comfort level, with the security or capability and so forth of providers today. But I think that's really where we have to be, is that we as IT professionals have to be focused on, how do I add the most value to my business? We've got to do it in a much, much faster time frame. Anything beyond 90 days, I think, is kind of unacceptable in our time frames. And then I think we have to, you kind of use arbitrage between what we do internally, think that as your private cloud, and then what you do externally. And it's really going to be based on your business, how you go back and forth in those. But I don't think we should be constrained anymore. I mean, you should really look at this as how I flex in and out, that whole flexible use. And I think that's the goal for us. So you abstract a lot of your computing power and your infrastructure and so forth, and you focus in on the top, the application side. That's where we add the most value, and I think that's the challenge for us as IT professionals.
Symantec is an old and a new company, right? I mean, you guys have modern products. You work in Silicon Valley, but you've been around a while. You've got a lot of legacy. In your role as director of strategy for data centers, what do you see as the push from your perspective, or the pull from the business to enable some of the things that Mark was just talking about?
So I wish I had a really exciting technology answer for you, but I don't. Typically, the best way I can address that, and what I push for the most right now, is can be kind of boiled down to process maturity. So the way that the business interacts today to deliver the products, to deliver services, if you want to abstract to another level, and the engagement with the kind of the older IT of the past has to change completely. So with what Mark was explaining, having an internal cloud, a hybrid, and then being able to burst out to the other, you have to have that process maturity and able to enable that, right? So you have to be able to, how do you manage the security was one item. How do you track assets? How do you meet compliance? How does, and today when anybody in the room can take their credit card, swipe it, and have instances available, how do you manage everything about that? All the different various tools that we can throw out there, CMDBs and all that sort of fun jazz. That is what I push for the most. So bringing the product teams together, the business teams together, having the dialogue on how they're going to change their processes of working together to deliver service. Because the way the business is working today, the way the applications are developed, the way that they're coded, some people found out the hard way the other day, what was that, yesterday? There's a little cloud outage, right? So clouds are not, at least one provider is not, for the answer for reliability. It's a highly distributed kind of a model to develop. So it's different at all those levels, and that's where it's going to be the enabler, or it's going to kind of crush. Because the capacity is there, the ability is there, the technology is there, it's that process maturity.
Right. So either of you, what could you add to this conversation? I mean, both organizations, David, you guys have got obviously a very forward-looking organization that's in the heat of the battle as far as supplying IT equipment and supplying equipment into the innovative portion of where IT is going, and as far as the cloud. Kurt, you work for an organization that is huge, has got to be thinking about this in a big way for a number of reasons. What could you add to this conversation?
Well, what I would add is I agree with the process layer. I think it's a organizational and a cultural change as well. I mean, we still have a lot of server huggers out there, and so the aspect of a
they're disk huggers at his job.
They're disk huggers. Yeah. But this notion of I'll give you capacity, trust me, it'll be available and reliable, and it'll meet your business need, right? There's not a lot of trust in the stack for that. And most of the distrust, in my view, is still within the IT organization. So an infrastructure person still has to provide a solution to an applications person who has to commit to delivery to a business person. And that could be a SaaS model in the cloud these days. But whether it's compliance or whatever other worry they might have, there's few clean ways to do the governance around that to actually put the service in play. And frankly, the IT organizations then become the slow piece of that puzzle, and the businesses can end up going around you. I had a colleague of mine the other day say that IT is the single gating function in every business activity in the company.
Yeah.
And you think about it, M&A, what's the hardest thing to get done? Is do that integration. You want to spin up new business features, ERP, it takes years. So we have to address that, and we have to address it within the IT organization as a cultural and an organizational and a governance completely challenge, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd follow on with that, which is kind of ties all these things together, which is it'd be easy for us to just assume we could do it ourselves. And while we probably have as much computing power as a lot of places in the world, they're not all capable, and I like the capacity perspective, right? I think it's really where is the best place to be doing that computing. And culturally, we have to change our mindset, right? Both from a nomenclature, a process capability from our systems, and then just an orientation that assumes it's not going to be within our own four walls. And for good reason, right? I mean, we should be modeling others outside from energy efficiency or capability, and get better about that, right? And I mean, SaaS is getting out there much quicker. I think cloud computing is going quicker. You have to figure out exactly where you want to be. And a data center that's been kind of behind the scenes, just left to its own devices, is some impediment to you in some way. You have to figure out exactly what that is, and depending upon what the gap is, figure out where that should go.
How do you see, the construction of data centers being able to be more of a contributor to the community, being a part of the community, as opposed to being the next Walmart in a community, right? And I mean, I'm sorry if you work at Walmart or if you have shares in Walmart, I don't mean that in a bad way, but ginormous 300,000 square foot buildings that just pop up somewhere overnight, it doesn't matter how you wrap them, they're still pretty ugly. So what can you do to minimize that impact to the environment, right? And the environment isn't just, do you cut down fewer trees? Do you use less new cement? It's more than that. It's how do I contribute to the community? I mean, there are several countries in Europe, for instance, that are actually using the heat generated from their data centers to heat local neighborhoods and heat swimming pools and things like that. I was at VMware a few years ago, and the data center that Mark Egan owns today uses heat from the servers to heat the office space, right? So there are a lot of opportunities there. So I apologize if I've taken away anybody's steam with those comments, but I'm going to start with Dan. What would you say about that?
First, without giving a specific technology response, I would say it's education, right? So I'm going to take a quote. I think David's probably got better and more accurate quotes than I, but when data centers are getting beat up by the industry, by communities, et cetera, it is difficult to remind, but I think it was ACEEE put a quote out about in 2008, for every 1 unit of energy consumed by IT, 6 to 14 units of energy are saved. I don't know, I'm just looking to see if I'm anywhere close over here, if I'm going to get in trouble. But with that type of education, folks should realize the advantages of doing it. So what we're talking about is the incremental gains, the innovation, the additional growth that we're doing, and squeezing the blood out of the rock, and that'll continue to happen. But that education, not to be lost, they're not evil. I mean, they're very, very much helping us get to where we want to go when you look at those types of equations. So there's all sorts of technology answers as far as the heating of adjacent space, and we always joke around about swimming pools and gardens and all that sort of stuff. But I believe it's more on the education side of the benefits of them, and seeing the dialogue with more sustainability officers and different areas of the business that's starting to come to light with some of the new metrics that are in the industry and so on and so forth.
Okay, Mark?
Well, I think you want to build as efficient as you can. The technologies that are out there and so forth. And then I think you want to figure out how can you, kind of live in that environment without disrupting it. It's use the air. How do you deal with the water, and reusing it and, not, pouring off a lot of water, the air, all those kinds of things. I think it's just striking that balance is that you want to be as absolute efficient as you can, because it's a big expense. It's a big expense for a company. It's the whole construction and so forth. But how do you do that in a way that you're kind of living with the environment and, and at the end of the day, the challenge I would say is that the environment where you put that data center is better as you go forward than when you started.
Right. Okay. Kurt?
I'd start off by saying, David's speech is, for the obvious reasons, not just true today, but every day of the year, of course.
Yep.
And I think historically, computing power is like a utility model. If you go into the shower in the morning, you turn it on, it's not hot, or the electricity isn't there, you get frustrated. Today's awareness, though, about not just for today, but for the year, and Echo Imagination, as our company calls it, right, is how does that electricity get consumed or created, I should say. So is it nuclear, is it coal, is it, gas-fired, whatever. And I think, when our data center 2 years ago looked at how it ranked and stacked against the others, and I saw the PUE rating, and we looked at what we could do with subtle improvements internally and still how we gapped against state-of-the-art, it was one of those transformative things that we had to really kind of get on. And it's, we talk about the expense of it, but I think if we really get knowledgeable in this area, it's more than just turning the shower on every morning. It's knowing that the utility you employ or utilize is a social conscious provider. And I think we are in the same arena. And go to the pump, it's getting costly more and more every day. Electricity and everything else is going to follow that suit. It's a question of how does that efficiency and social consciousness come together.
I think the problem with data centers and IT people and consumers is that there's no natural integration of those folks today. Unless I'm an IT organization that's leasing a data center, I probably don't know what my cost for a data center is. Most of those bills go up through some facilities VP, and they never see the power bill, they never see the capital cost for the build, and they don't worry about it until they run out of space, and then they've got a $100 million problem. So there's a lack of integration. If you look at the old colo models where you're going to pay for the size of the circuit no matter what percentage of it you actually consume, and the shift now to more of a wholesale model, there's still no incentive for the IT equipment to behave better in that model, right? So if I got a great data center, if I got a data center that's running at a PUE of 1.2, but my equipment's only 5% utilized, is that good? Probably not. So there's no correlation, or not good enough correlation, between this capacity on demand sort of thing and the agility that may go along with that, and the old styles of thinking. It gets back to culture. It gets back to, why wouldn't a colo incent somebody to actually draw higher utilization out of their kit if they're selling a wholesale model, so that they'd know better what their predictable capacity requirements were, and they wouldn't be thinking about the marginal difference of trying to oversell the power they got to the building. So the incentives aren't lined up, the ecosystems don't interoperate very well, and until we solve those problems, we're still going to solve things in silos only to the degree that we need to. And I think that's a huge challenge.
So I want to thank the panel very much for some great comments and great thought-provoking ideas around data centers.